People who grew up poor, what did you used to think was normal? Story 1 for my school spirit week. They had a thrift shop day, where most everyone dressed in old ratty clothes, or the weirdest stuff they could find in a thrift shop. Needless to say, as someone whose clothes were 80 secondhand, it was an eye-opener. Story 2 cleaning your plate. I honestly still do. If I pay for food I'm gonna eat it all, and if not I will save it. So many people I've eaten with will leave food and it's just disposed of. My stepdad didn't realize that for 14 years. Leftovers. Trash nah, my mother single-handedly raised 2 boys. We don't waste. Edit man, this got a lot of attention. I got a slice of pie award, whatever that is, never traveling out of the country or state. Kids always talked about where they traveled, like during break, summer vacation for example. Story 3 skipping lunch dinner periodically so one of us could have all 3 meals. Like, Tuesdays, Thursday, Sunday I didn't eat dinner but my little brother did, and every other day my mom didn't eat lunch or dinner so me and my brother could. I only started skipping meals for my mom because she was getting physically sick from not eating. My mom having to buy a new 3,000 car every couple of years because our previous one broke down and we don't have enough to repair it, coming home to see the water electricity were off, having to buy jugs of water at the dollar store so we could flush the toilet. Leaving a giant hole in the entryway where water had leaked through because we just couldn't afford to repair it. Not having heat, having to bath with water from jugs, waking up and realizing our washing machine had broken down again, so I rub my dirty clothes with washing detergent to try and mask the stale scent clothing gets when it hasn't been washed. To this day, people making comments about something smelling weird, even if not directed at me, makes me have major anxiety attacks. Only having one pair of super cheap shoes that would have to wear until they fell apart. The amount of times I tripped over the soles of my own shoes in my HS hallways was ridiculous. Story 4 I never saw my parents because they worked so much. When I was in elementary school, we lived in an apartment above the bar they owned. My time with them was spent working in the kitchen, doing homework at the bar, and then walking upstairs to put myself to bed. We eventually moved and I was always alone. From Wednesday morning through Saturday, I would wake and walk to school, come home, make dinner, do homework, and go to bed with no contact from an adult. This continued throughout secondary school. From 6th through 12th grade, I was so incredibly lonely, but it was normal for me. I can't imagine how my world would have been different if they didn't need to work so much to scrape by. Story 5 everyone in the house going into the kitchen to see what groceries were brought home and being so excited as if it was Christmas. Also, now that my family is doing a lot better than when I was growing up, we find ourselves hoarding food, stocking up on canned goods, buying things in bulk on sale as if we are waiting for those rainy days to hit again. Does anyone else experience this? Story 6 only having lunch at school, like that being the only meal of the day. I learned when I was like 10, then I started saving my food and bringing it home so my brother and sister could eat. Story 7 7 to 14 years old going to school then going to work, after school delivering newspapers and also collecting their payments, never a day off. One time we had so much snow that the post office closed, yet my little had to deliver, latchkey kid at 10 years old because parents worked. Being a girl, I was also responsible for cooking dinner for my father and older brothers and other household chores. I was also expected to excel at school. I did. My schedule was so strict. One thing I hated the most were science fairs. All the rich kids had so much help and confidence. Then there was me with a piece of cardboard, loads of stress and anxiety. Story 8 I knew it wasn't normal, but we didn't have heat or air conditioning in my house. We used a stove and the oven to heat the first floor, and the second floor was usually freezing. When the weather turned hot, we were just hot. Story 9 used to live in a poor country and in a poor area until my parents immigrated to Canada and worked their off to get to middle class here. 1. Eating vegetables mixed with a cream. Every day, we used to eat zucchini with sour cream. A lot. Just 3 small zucchinis with sour cream, or beans with sour cream, or bean soup. Our soup with just leaves. 2. Eating meat was rare. We would only eat meat in special events. 3. Having broken windows or broken doors. For being afraid of where you lived. You were afraid to get robbed, raped, killed, etc. Whenever we would go out we would try to bring the least things as possible, and whenever we did bring things we would hide them in our underwear, socks, in between books, etc. 5. Not being able to take out personal devices or jewelry in public. 6. Having a little bit of change to give in case you got robbed. Whenever we went outside we would always bring extra change to give to robbers in case we got robbed. Because if you said you didn't have nothing they would get extremely pissed. 7. Clearly knowing and understanding what rape, murder, kidnap, violence, stabbing, shooting, beheading, etc. is at 5 to 6 years old. 8. Not having lunch breakfast. 9. Buying a 50-cent bag of chips and sharing it with all your siblings, cousins and family members was very special. 10. Seeing your father go days without coming home and then only seeing him once a week at night, only for him to come home drunk and beat you, your siblings and mother up. 11. Parents fighting. Lots of fighting. 12. Being beaten until bruised by your father, or almost bleeding from the belt marks, or seeing your mother with bruises as well. 13. Seeing others' kids poorer than you or equally as poor as you and not really feel bad or think that they're unfortunate. You're just able to relate. 14. Professors, teacher, public figures looking down on you and other kids bragging how they have more things than you. 15. No birthday parties or gifts. 16. To one Christmas gift for you and your siblings usually given by your uncle. 17. Feeling extremely fortunate and a very special occasion being able to have one Oreo cookie. 18. Shopping at thrift shops and extremely rare getting new clothes and having to take care of it like it was your life, or having clothes that doesn't fit you. 19. Having the box the TV came in as a TV stand. 20. Playing with plastic bottles as soccer, or just making up random games to stay entertained. 21. Getting gifts from Salvation Army or donation centers for Christmas. 22. Not eating some days, or your mother not eating so you guys would eat. 23. Broken toys and broken furniture. 24. Never visiting or knowing what a dentist is. I didn't visit a dentist until I was like 12, when we had moved to Canada and my mom had managed to land herself a good job with benefits. 25. Eating expired food, or eating around rotten food. 26. Having shoes with holes in them or sometimes just sandals. 27. Getting a buzz cut because regular styled hair is too expensive. 28. No brand stuff. 29. If something is running out, mix it with water. Sometimes we would literally just be using water from the shampoo bottle. Also not having a regular shampoo bottle but a sample that was grabbed from somewhere. 30. Lots of discount food that if not eaten right away would expire soon. 31. Thinking that owning a car or a house is for the extremely rich. 32. Seeing people drugged out of their mind. 33. Seeing domestic violence in your neighborhood. 35. Stray dogs and cats. 36. Never having Christmas decorations and always going to someone else's parties for Christmas. As a matter of fact, I don't remember any decorations whatsoever in my house. Maybe a random broken painting that my parents had found in someone's trash. 37. Knowing and believing that you and your voice don't matter to anyone, and no one cares about you. 38. If you're sick, in pain, or something is wrong, rub it out, drink some water with lemon, put some Vicks on a go to sleep. 39. Also, every furniture you have is either given by someone else or was found in someone's garbage. 40. Never going to school trips because you can't afford it. 41. No cable channels, all open air. Bless the soul of channel stations that air free children's shows. Besides infomercials, news, or talk shows, it was extremely rare to find a channel that was visible didn't have crazy amount of static that would air children TV shows. Anyways, there are lots more. Those are the only ones I can think of right now, but it's funny how people like romanticize poverty. Especially in the movies, they make it seem like poverty is living in freedom, and you can do whatever because you have nothing to lose. This is not true. Poverty is a living. It is a nightmare I cannot forget. I am often haunted by the experiences I had and the thing I saw as a kid. I will sometimes watch a random video on YouTube or Netflix and there will be a scene that will remind me of it and I will break down. I had one today when I was watching the case of Gabriel Fernandez. Things like that are so common in some countries. I try not to think about the past because I get extremely angry and want to bawl my eyes out for my childhood. I saw things that kids should never know. The worst part that haunts me the most, and it aches my heart, was the fact that I knew kids who had it worse than me, way worse. To this day, I am so ashamed and sad that I did not understand what they meant when they told me what their parents did to them, what others had done to them. As a kid you're aware but not aware, but when you get older these things become a weight in your soul that take a toll on you. Till this day there are things that I will not say to other people, or have told anyone of the things I've experienced as a kid. I don't have the strength to get it out. I am too ashamed that I was not able to do anything, and I do not want to break down in front of people. Poverty is a living. Story 10. I'm female, if it matters. My family's budget fluctuated a lot. In our poorer years, I thought it was normal to wear my brother's hand-me-downs and make them last as long as possible, until my pants were so short that 3 or so inches of my ankles were showing. Gotta make those clothes last 10 years at least. Also, when my dad started making enough money that he could splurge and buy steak, I thought steak was nasty. Turns out, my dad could only afford the cheapest, gnarliest cut of steak possible. Basically, I would chew and chew only to have it turn to meat gum in my mouth. It was totally inedible. So I wondered why all the wealthier families liked steak so much. Story 11. Parents fighting and physically assaulting each other while expecting their kid to do well at school and beating the living out of him if grades go south. Story 12. I grew up thinking food was a scarcity. Whenever we went anywhere my mom would tell me and my sisters to not accept food from people. She didn't want our hunger to be someone else's burden. Now that I'm in college and go places like my boyfriend's family's house, it's seen as rude to refuse food. My automatic response is to politely refuse even if I hadn't eaten all day. Even after years and now being able to mostly get by myself, it still sometimes feels like being hungry is a normal state. I sometimes still forget to eat. My stomach will tell me I'm hungry, but because it was so ingrained in me that hunger is normal, I typically won't realize I'm hungry until I get a headache. Story 13. When I was about 15, my family went from being dirt poor to closer to stable but still under the poverty line. But from 4 to 15, these were things my family did that I didn't realize were abnormal. Not seeing my parents for 10 to 14 hours out of my day, because they were working as hard as they could manage. Starting work at the age of 10, because my parents owned a business and couldn't afford employees. Saving every last scrap of leftover food and using it to make something else. Finding my friends' lives of cool toys and yearly vacations to be luxurious and fairy tale-esque. Now I'm living relatively comfortably, but man, if these aren't still something I think about. Story 14. Shopping at thrift shops. It wasn't until I got to high school that no one else shopped there, or the fact that a lot of our stuff came second-hand markets and things like that. Story 15. Growing up, whenever winter came we used to pull all of the blankets out of the closet and bundle up at night. We didn't have working heat and most nights it would go way below freezing, I always looked forward to it though and would love getting gathered up in a million blankets and sit next to the space heater. I also shared a small room with both my sisters and slept on one twin bed with them. My brothers did the same in the room across from us. Story 16. I still think the concept of family road trips is super weird, like it's only something I know from movies. I didn't leave my province until I was 22 with my friend. When I went to rich kids' houses, I was in awe of the kitchen pantry. You mean you can walk into it? How many different cereals do you have? What's Costco? Almost forgot going to pawn shops. Story 17. Riding the bus everywhere. My mom not buying food for herself, then taking small bites from mine. I would get mad at her. Now that I'm grown I see she did a great sacrifice and am so grateful. Going to my grandma's house I would have so much fun, but she would feed us and she was our babysitter, but I just had fun there. My dad was a deadbeat who was never in the picture. Story 18. Living in a tent. Buying second-hand clothes and passing them down to my pocket younger sister when I outgrew them. Always repairing clothes. Spending time around the welding yard where my dad worked because he had no other place to put us. Things worked out. My mom started her own company and my dad got a job at Ubisoft. He does 3D modeling for Far Cry now. Sister is a dog walker and married to a millionaire developer manager at Shopify, and I make good money in business development. I don't think many poor families get that lucky though. Story 19. I'm still in high school but apparently wearing the same pair of shoes every day. Saw someone else at school get made fun of because they only ever wear one pair. Annoyed the out of me. Not everyone has enough money to buy 7 different pairs of shoes. Story 20. I always thought knowing about bills and the bills amount was normal for a kid. Also knowing the rent amount, I went over to a well-off friend's nice home and asked what was their rent amount was, LMAO. Story 21. Adding water to the little bit of soap, shampoo, conditioner left in the bottle to make it last. My mom would take a bunch of ramen noodle packages and make one big soup for the family, putting patches on holes in our clothes. Story 22. I thought everyone was supplied breakfasts at elementary school, and the people who didn't eat it just didn't have breakfast for some reason. I didn't understand breakfast until my mom married a guy who was rich enough to rent a house. Story 23. Not me, but my dad grew up dirt poor in India. We are upper class in the US now. He would tell me how he would get shoes, not new shoes, just shoes. So India is primarily a Hindu nation and there are temples everywhere. People leave their shoes and sandals in front of the temple before entering in order to not track dirt into the temple. So my dad would go to a temple to pray. He would ask God for a pair of shoes and just walk out with someone else's shoes that fit, rinse and repeat. Edit grammar. Story 24. Bartering. My parents had a small print shop and they would trade for things because they could get more than if they paid cash. That one lady in the neighborhood who would watch all the kids. Not a daycare or anything. Just an old lady who was at home so the parents would have their kids go there after school. Story 25. Hand-me-downs making their way through the entire family, not just sibling to sibling. Like we were wearing clothes for my mom's younger first cousins 10 years older than me and my siblings. I wore a lot of 80s fashions as a 90s kid. Story 26. I'm 60 and as a small child I lived with my grandparents for a couple of years on a small farm in the middle of nowhere. I have used an outhouse which was worse. Winter you froze your butt off, or summer where you often felt something hairy walking on your hind end. A telephone attached to the wall with a crank, and later we had a party line where all your neighbors could listen in on your telephone calls at will. No bike, but an old wagon that had been owned by my stepdad when he was a kid. And nearly all my clothes had been handmade by my grandma. On the other hand, we had a giant garden, and everything got canned, so all our food was completely homemade and delicious. Including ice cream, and she and I would regularly go looking for wild raspberries, asparagus, horseradish and rhubarb. Everything was so fresh. One of my duties was catching a hen and holding it while grandma chopped its head off. I'd wait until it stopped running around and take it to the basement where she'd pluck it and then made chicken noodle soup for that evening's supper. Story 27. Using laundry detergent, dish soap, bar soap or whatever kind of soap you scrape together to wash your hair, picking fruit from the trees and bushes next to the sidewalk and canning it, bringing home-blown mushrooms from the Safeway dumpster and drying them under the stove to use in soups. Mom getting your Christmas gifts secondhand from the flea market, getting your school clothes secondhand from the flea market, powdered milk, lots of pots of soup, all year round, saving wrapping paper and bows from birthday parties we went to so that we'd have something to wrap our gifts in. Mom sleeping in the living room so me and my brother could have our own rooms, bringing peanut butter on bread and sliced carrots or celery to school for lunch, every day, collecting aluminum cans from people's recycling bins to cash in to have the 2 to go to the school dance. Story 28. That people can buy more than 2 of something at a time. I was very shocked to learn this when I got my first job as a teen. I looked at people who would come to the cash register and asked them if they accidentally grabbed more than they originally intended to. They would reply with no or something like that. Needless to say I was shocked. Edit. I know this sounds stupid, but I grew up exceedingly poor, like barely able to buy food every month. My dad was raising me on a social security check by himself. Story 29. Living off of a part-time job. My father became disabled from a work injury when I was only 2, so my entire childhood he never worked and always stayed home. My mother worked part-time as a pharmacy technician and at most made about $9.50 an hour. I grew up a single child, so between my dad's disability checks and my mom's couple $100 checks we got by. I have been working 45 hours a week since I've turned 18 just to get by. Sometimes I had 2 or 3 jobs and many roommates and still struggled. I'm now lucky enough to live and save money from one decent paying job. But I'll always be impressed and thankful my parents managed their money well enough for us to live well and instill good habits upon me. Story 30. Wearing a clothing more than once. I once heard a girl saying at school that she's disgusted someone wore the same shirt for 2 days, buying clothes only once in a while, a year or two for kids. Like, I honestly do not remember when my parents would even buy them for us, would get them from people and yes, would like and wear them. Until a guy decided to help and opened a shop for people who can't afford. All rejected clothing but really cheap and most are really good, if not your style. So since I started to work, I bought my own there and it hit me I haven't had a new t-shirt in really long, repairing whatever electronic device or anything at all to make them reusable. My father is an electronic technician who's tried his hand at many jobs while trying to find his way, so he basically can do everything. One thing I love about him, he'd even fabricates some of our furnitures, me brother's bunk bed for example, but most of our furnitures are just repaired. It's only recently that we started to buy our own appliances. So pretty much, most of our things are like 15 to 20 years old, from our computer to our shower, all repaired. My laptop was most likely the first device we bought from an actual store. Story 31. When we were very young, my sister and I didn't know you could take toys home from Walmart. My parents would let us play in the toy aisle for a little while, and when it was time to go, we put everything back and went home. We never asked for the toys or threw a fit because as far as we knew, the toys permanently stayed at the store for kids to play with while they were there. Story 32. Only having cable TV once a year for about 2 months. Got older, I realized when tax returns hit, my mom would pay the bill and get cable activated. Then 2 months later it would get cut off for non-payment. Story 33. Freshman year at college made me really realize a lot of things when I suddenly had 6 middle-class roommates. Disconnecting your stove oven, not heating things in the microwave for more than a minute to save on electricity bills isn't normal. Neither is having to beg your mom to beg your dad to turn on the heating at night, only to have them give you their own blankets, measuring out a certain amount of dish soap to mix with water to use per month, parents having always already eaten while I wasn't there to see they hadn't, people go on vacations, and stay overnight places, taking home any leftover fruits veggie cups I could find from school for my mom. I had to fight the instinct to take home leftovers from events at first. I was like, wait, I don't even like onions. Now who's going to eat it now? Not me. When a friend in college who also grew up poor first bought a Little Caesars together for ourselves, we both had to stop eating because we'd forgotten to breathe since neither of us were used to there being more than enough slices. We were trying to hurry. It's honestly wild realizing how differently my roommates had grown up. A few months into my first semester I decided to splurge on a big jar of salsa and dropped it after I paid for it and sobbed in the parking lot. I later told them I was just stressed, but at the time I was trying to make 40 last indefinitely. Also, nothing is more mind-boggling than seeing a walk-in pantry or closet, or a second garage fridge for the first time. DMO man, I've also just remembered people will eat salad at buffets. My parents always had us eat as much food as we could since it was so rare to eat out. They wanted us to get every last dollar out of it. Side note, the smell of powdered milk, or the texture of a cheap white bread fake square cheese with mayo chewy ham sandwich are things I can mentally taste shudders. Story 34. Going on a holiday meant driving 2 to 3 hours to stay with relatives. Being robbed happened often, and I thought that was normal. Eating fast food was a rare occurrence saved for birthdays. Story 35. Hoarding and reusing everything. This includes things like tissues, clothing with holes in it, and any and all utensils, condiments that came into our life, moving every 6 to 12 months as soon as the rent was raised. Story 36. Got a scholarship to play sports at a fancy private school. No one in my class had ever been to a laundromat. It blew my mind that people had their own washing and drying machines. Story 37. Eating at random times depending on how much food and money was left. There's people that actually have meals like in the movies, and they eat it with their families 3 times a day. Insanity. Story 38. I've replied to a comment below regarding lack of heat and air conditioning. But hey, race another. Normal for us, normal for anyone else I knew. It was just the way things were. We lived for several years on the river bottoms, surrounded by fields of tomatoes, corn, muskmelon, potatoes, watermelon, etc. We rented a house, not a farm, but there was ample garden space. Our back garden was feet from one of those fields. Whatever the farmer planted a given year would fail miserably in our garden because all the pests they sprayed for would invade. I remember picking up what we called skid potatoes from the side of the road in the evening. Potatoes that had bounced out of the truck. They were bruised, had scrapes on them, and had to be used within a day or two after trimming the bad bits away. For that few weeks in the fall, every belly in the house was full. We had potatoes every way you can think of and some ways you probably never would. By the end of the potato harvest, we'd be so sick of potatoes that our undamaged ones from our garden went untouched in the cellar for a solid month. Apart from those we canned, sometimes a melon would split right when it hit the road that you could salvage part for dessert. Pause for a moment and consider the humiliation of being 13, picking up the least blemished produce that fell off the trucks, and people you know from school going past in cars with their families. This was a main road, hence all the trucks. Then consider the novel experience of being able to eat until you nearly can't move being enough to get you out there every freaking day. Even when you think you can't eat another one. August, September, and October in that part of the country was canning season. August was pure misery. The heat and humidity were unreal. We had a well probably full of farm chemicals and would soak our hands and feet in cool water while the stove radiated heat, sealing up our processing for the day. By late September, The nights were typically getting cooler, but we lived in one of those contrary parts of the country where the end of October might be so cold that you could get snow or so hot that people were going about in shorts and t-shirts in the heat of the day. But the house smelled so good during harvest, and I loved to see all those jars lined up in the cellar like a mini market. By 14, I could get hired on for farm labor. I quickly discovered that detasseling corn was out one day, and I was covered in rash with my eyes swollen shut, even with the long sleeves long pants detasseling uniform. They wouldn't allow me to board the bus, and they will take anyone with a pulse who even attempts to do a good job. Picking was backbreaking, but I would hire on for whatever the farmer we backed up to was growing. Because I could usually take a bushel box at market price to can at home, my pay went into household funds because housing important. TLDR, we were really freaking poor, lived in farm country, picked up what fell off the trucks and was marginally salvageable, but ate okay until late winter with stuff we canned from our garden and later my farm work. Story 39. My dad told me his parents, my grandparents, would initiate random singing in the lounge as a family bonding activity. Kids loved it and thought it was a weird but fun family gimmick. Turns out they were trying to drown out the sound of the ice cream van BC. They couldn't afford to buy any and didn't want to disappoint 3 kids. Story 40. Going to see a movie as a once a year if that often event. I was an adult living on my own before I realized you could just look at the movie listings, pick a movie, and go at any time. Movies were for other people. This was before cable TV, before VHS tapes or DVDs, way before streaming. We watched popular movies on ABC Saturday night at the movies, or waited for the annual showing of Wizard of Oz, etc. Story 41. So apparently hot dogs and beans is a poor meal, but we had this all the time growing up. I have the means to afford food now and I still crave this from time to time. I just buy the more expensive brands. Story 42. I grew up poor in rural Ohio, not quite Appalachia but real close. I lived in a single wide trailer with my mom. I remember helping my mom make the grocery list knowing we only had 20 to spend for the week, playing in the garden hose and sitting in front of the box fan because we didn't have air conditioning, getting free movies from the library instead of Blockbuster, etc. Honestly, I wouldn't trade it for anything. I learned how to be independent. All the number crunching made me great at math. But most of all, as cheesy as it is, I learned the best things in life really don't cost anything. I lost my mom to ALS a few years back and there's nothing I wouldn't give to be sitting in front of that box fan with her watching bad movies. I'm sure this isn't true for everyone, but when I look back on my life and think of the times when I was the happiest, they never match up to the times when I had the most money. It's usually the opposite. Whatever your problems are, there is someone out there that would love to have them because what they are going through is so much worse. No matter how bad life can get, there is always something to be thankful for. 3. Story 43. 1. We would meticulously plan our errands all on the same day, so we wouldn't have to use gas to go out multiple days in a week. We'd plan our meals and price out ingredients beforehand. Those errand days felt like we were a strike team going out to get done. We would pack lunches and eat in the car so we wouldn't have to buy lunch out too. On days where we didn't have anything for dinner, we had what we called scatter night, which basically meant you had to fend for yourself. I would typically reach out to my friends on those days, and their families were always happy to let me join them. If I had some money saved up, I'd walk to the sandwich shop in our neighborhood and get food there. Just remembering those nights makes me want to reach out to those parents. I didn't think much of it at the time, but I can't thank them enough for feeding me on those days. 3. I didn't know that it wasn't normal to divvy up dinner for a long time. My family was very conscientious of making sure everyone was served a proportional amount. When we were kids, my mom would just plate our food for us. But as we got older and started to serve ourselves, I remember my dad always telling us have as much as you want and always being sure to leave enough for him. My dad was always the last to eat, because he wanted to make sure his family was fed. But we all quietly knew we had to make sure we didn't take too much, so he could eat too. I love my dad, dude. I distinctly remember a point in my childhood where my father said we don't eat for pleasure, only for nourishment. For a long time, I held on to that sentiment and ate whatever was provided. Also, for most of my youth, my family only had a main course dish about 3 times a week. Every other dinner was just a culmination of what are generally considered side dishes: mashed potatoes, vegetables, and beans, cottage cheese, etc. When I got older and spent more time hanging out with friends and having dinner at their house, I was shocked to see a main dish at each meal. I've told this to people before and they were taken back and negative, but we got by with what we could afford. I am grateful I had parents that were willing to work their asses off and provide me a meal every day. It wasn't much, but it has given me an appreciation for food that I don't think many people have nowadays. Story 44. No electricity, so no TV, no running water, so no indoor bathroom, popcorn for meals, hitchhiking, washing clothes in buckets, collecting firewood in the forest, never having a bed frame, cooking over fire. Story 45. If you're like me and reading various posts and realizing just how many of us grew up poor, imagine from our parents' perspective and give them a call and tell them thank you. Story 46. Shopping in my grandparents' basement. My grandma grew up in an orphanage and said none of her children and by extension, grandchildren would ever go hungry. Because of this, she always kept a freezer full of meat, frozen meals, veggies, etc. in the basement. We used to eat spaghetti dinners with them every Friday as children, and she always sent extra food home from the freezer with us. I miss her. I was fortunate to have a lot of family support, even though my mom's sister and I didn't have a lot ourselves. Story 47. Not having a winter coat. Grew up in Michigan. I'd layer a sweater of mine and my dad would give me one of his sweaters. He couldn't afford to buy me one, and I could tell it destroyed him. He owned a business and after employees and bills were paid, he didn't have much left. I still appreciate what he did for me. I was this tiny little middle school girl with a gigantic men's sweater on that would end up soaked on the bottom from the snow, so every winter I make it a point now to donate some new winter jackets to the schools. Story 48 Homie, sit down, I'm about to learn you some. I was only allowed to bathe once a week. As a boy going into his teens, this definitely put a damper on my socialization. I've eaten spaghetti with ragu and ramen noodles so much in my life that it was a treat to have free of vegetables. My parents have been astounded their entire lives about my love for fresh veggies that they've told me multiple times how sorry they both were broken family that we never had access to them because produce was super expensive. I'm not vegan, I just love veggies. Snap peas are delicious, y'all better than candy, so are peppers yum. The city I live in and went to school in has a dress code, white, black or navy blue collared shirts with the same color pants, skirts, and shorts, black or white sneakers. I had to wear the same thing growing up 3 years straight. I had to make a pair of shoes last 3 years. Birthdays were largely ignored outside of some box cake and a song. When I moved in with my mom, I had to sleep on a couch because my younger sister and my parents needed a bed more. When I grew up, I was so conditioned to think this is normal that I was so happy I had my own room when my mother and stepfather moved. For the first time in my life at that point, I had my own room. I was 13. For the first time in my life, I had my own blankets and pillows, my own dresser, my own window. When I was 14, I had my first real birthday party, with like friends but I never took that for granted, and am trying to teach my kids the same. Up until I was a teenager, I always thought my bedroom was a real bedroom. It wasn't until I made friends that I found out I was actually sleeping in the sunroom made so much sense why it was always so cold after I found out.